Hello everyone and welcome to the last webinar for 2017, brought to you by the CBAA, supported by the Community Media Training Organisation. This evening's webinar, your guide to the community radio station health check. Why does governance matter? How can it help community broadcasters day to day and in the long term? Well, join us this evening as CBAA CEO and CEO of the CMTO, that's the Community Media Training Organisation, John and Geordie, take us through the Community Radio Station Health Check, an online tool recently launched at the 2017 CBAA conference that helps you gauge the effectiveness of governance at your station. I should also start this webinar by stating that this evening's webinar is brought to you on Gadigal land, and as such we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, paying respects to elders past, present and emerging. Obviously we're going nationwide, so if you'd like to give a shout out to the traditional owners in your land, please feel free to pop that in the instant box or take a bit of time out and acknowledge the First Nations people here in Australia. I think that the microphone is on for Geordie and John. So Geordie, I will give you control of the screen now and let you guys get started for the final webinar of 2017, your guide to the Community Radio Station Health Check.
Thanks very much, Danny. Hopefully my screen is up on yours now. Can you see it, John?
I can.
Okay, I'm just going to flip through to the first screen so you can take it away.
Thanks, Geordie, and thanks, Danny, and hello to everyone that's joined us from around the country today. Today's session is primarily about the new CBAA's governance health check, but I thought before we kick off discussing the actual health check and showing you how you can use it for your station, that we just talk a little bit about governance and why it matters. Governance refers to the processes, activities and relationships of your station that make sure your station is run effectively and properly. It's critically important. There is good governance usually when stations have practices and procedures in place that help them to do their work effectively and openly, and when the roles and responsibilities of people in the station are clearly understood. This includes roles of committee members, roles of staff, volunteers and members. So it's really about clarity of what is happening. And of course, good governance is more than rules of your organisation and the individual behaviours of board members. It involves strong relationships with members of your governing body, whether that's a committee or a board, and importantly, stakeholders working collectively rather than individually. So why is governance important? I think good governance helps make sure that day-to-day work of a station aligns with and contributes to a station's purpose. Stations are there to deliver a service and to provide for their community of interest, and it's important that board members are regularly asking why they are there, what they are doing and how they are going to do various things. Asking these questions and then trying to help them, help stations sort of continue moving in the direction that they should be moving in. So Geordie, if you want to flick to the next slide, I think what we've recently done is acknowledge that good governance, or we've acknowledged that good governance is an area that where we think stations need some particular assistance. It's really important that all good stations, all community radio stations out there are practicing good governance. And to assist with that, the CBAA launched a station health check tool at our most recent conference, and Geordie and I are going to take you through to that today. We've been assisted in the health checks development and the resources that underpin it by the CMTO, and Geordie, thanks so much for your help. The health check is essentially an online self-assessment tool aimed at helping stations examine how they are operating. It looks at a number of different factors that are crucial to a station's success, and together these factors are used to build an overall picture of the way a station operates and carries out its activities. The assessment generally takes no more than about 30 minutes. It can be done more quickly. And once you have answered all your questions, a detailed report is then instantly emailed to the person that completed, or their email address that you entered, that identifies areas for growth. One of the really important things that we're recommending up front is that you don't do it all individually. It's very easy for someone to say, oh yeah, we're doing that really well, but to use the health check as a tool for example, at a committee meeting where you can sit down and say, look at a particular question, and we'll show you some of these questions in a minute, and say, are we doing this well or not? And actually have a conversation or a discussion about whether you're actually doing it well. And I think that's one of the, real ways to improve the operations of a station is involve the whole committee in assessing the board and the station's governance. So, Geordie, I'll hand over to you to start talking about the health check.
Sure thing. Thanks so much, John. And yeah, it has been a real great opportunity for the CMTO to work on this health check with the CBAA. One of the things that the Community Media Training Organisation does is a lot of governance training. So I know there's a few people in the room this evening where we've come out to your stations and we've either run a governance session or a strategic planning session, and actually talked about some of the things that we'll cover in the session this evening. So the health check is, as John mentioned, something that is a great tool to use with your board as a group. And it looks specifically at a number of areas around governance and around the way that your station runs, so that you can start to drill down and really investigate and interrogate some of those things. And they include things like the vision and mission of your station. We always spend hours looking at our vision and mission, so we're going to have a look at that. Your actual governance structures, the culture and leadership at the station, and also decision making. So all of these kind of combine to make your station a success. So what the report does is that it gives you a summary on how your station is performing on those key drivers. So you go through and you actually answer a whole range of questions, and in the end it emails you this very thorough report. It has these beautiful kind of colourful charts in it as well to give you a really good idea of how you're going, and gives you a whole bunch of advice. So I'm going to go through some of that advice so you can see the examples of it throughout the session, and John's going to join me in that. We did a sample station, my favourite station, DIY FM, just to kind of see what came out from if I went through and actually did it. Now, I've been out to loads of stations, have lots of experience in hearing how stations deal with certain things in their governance. So I took some of my experience of working at 4ZZZ, Radio Skid Row, FBI, kind of smushed it all together and answered the questions in relation to that. So in the kind of final report that came out for me in DIY FM was that my station had some troubles and needed some work in the red areas there: culture and leadership and governance. We were doing pretty okay. We had our head around what the vision and mission was, but our culture and leadership and governance were not doing great. So we're going to follow this example through this evening and have a look at some of the other areas and sort of drill down into that. For each of the key drivers, the health check also identifies some critical areas for success, and one of the amazing things it does is it provides action plans and feedback on each area to help your station improve. So it does give you some really practical steps to help you improve in those areas when it highlights what they are. So in DIY FM, we can see that in the area of governance, if we look at those red dots on the screen, the station is particularly in need of improvement in committee management, for example. So their committee management is pretty bad. So that's something that they're going to, the report will actually give us a little bit more advice around. The other thing the report does is that it actually gives you an overall rating to help you move towards a best practice model. And you can see on the far right of your screen, there's the green one there that there's just one mistake in there. It says sport in there, so just ignore that. That's not in the final one now. But it does say that the best practice for a station is that it's dynamic and optimized. There's near real-time alignment with changing community needs. There's a competitive advantage driven through proactive management. So I don't know how many of us could say that our stations are at that point at the moment, but it's definitely something that we'd love to move towards. In terms of DIY FM, we were given the rating of the yellow one there, standardized with structures operating. So not too bad. We're just above the basic level. Management structures exist and they are functioning. Systems and organisation might not be complete and the records might not be accurate or reliable for decision making. So there's a few areas for us to improve on there. So it just gives you a bit of an idea of where you're kind of sitting in the scale of best practice. So kind of looking a little bit more deeply into some of the critical success factors and the key drivers, the first one we're going to have a little bit of a think about is vision and mission. So I'm assuming most of you have a vision statement or a mission statement for your station. If you actually know what it is off the top of your head, it'd be great if you popped it into the chat box and share some of those vision or mission statements. The vision statement should really illustrate what your station wants to become in the future. So for example, Crew Radio's vision statement is to be recognised as a vibrant and respected Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community radio station, encouraging participation in Indigenous issues through all age groups. So it's kind of hefty, it's there, but it covers all of the things. And then a mission statement is a little bit briefer. It states your station's purpose and identifies the scope of what the station does. So for example, my old station 4ZZZ's mission statement revised in the last couple of years to be this snappy statement, which is basically connecting and amplifying the voices of our local communities. So it's important that vision and mission reflect the aspirations of the station's stakeholders, particularly its community of interest. So that's sort of a bit of a background on your vision and mission, and it's a great starting place. When I went through, oh, and Cynthia's put one of the mission statements up, which is great. Thanks, Cynthia. And if anyone else has a mission statement or a vision statement of their station, or maybe you have an aspirational one, pop it into the chat box. It'd be great to have a bit of a read of them. On the screen now, we can see how DIY FM went in the health check. So when I was filling this out as the, I guess, board member of DIY FM, the question asked of me was, our community radio station is guided by a stated vision. Now, the great thing about the health check is that every question has a hint. You can see it in the kind of very faint writing there. When you hover over that in the health check, it will bring up this yellow box that actually gives you a bit of an example to guide you in terms of how you should answer the question. So it helps you understand the words like stated vision and what that actually means. So I thought somewhat was how DIY FM was kind of going against the stated vision. We were guided by it, but maybe not completely. And then what it spits out in the end is these are the other questions that were asked around that actually was that the radio station understands why it exists and what it's trying to achieve. And I said yes. And that we understand our community of interest and their needs, yes. So that kind of meant that, you know, maybe there's some stuff around the vision and mission, but maybe not all of it. So the report's taken my answers and they've given me some advice and best practice about vision and mission and what our station should do. So they said it's a medium priority. We can see the yellow there. And they have said, okay, here's some useful information on how you can actually maybe make your vision or mission statement a little bit better and how you might go about getting your station to follow that and be guided by it. Because I guess the interesting thing there is that there's no point having a vision or mission statement if it doesn't resonate with anyone at the station and it's not something that you're actually doing. So that's quite important. To make sure that it's a vision statement or a mission that's actually achievable. There is the other really great part of this is that you get some resources. So you can see down the bottom there that it actually has some links to resources on how to develop your vision and mission statement. It has links to the community radio codes of practice, so you can directly refer to how you meet your community of interest needs, and also some information on strategic and organisational planning. So every time the report sort of gives you some best practice, it also gives you some further resources to refer to. All right, over to you, John.
Thanks, Geordie. As I sort of mentioned right at the beginning, a major driver of a station success are its governance practice, and the health check helps you assess some of these areas. So the health check is going to help stations look at their committee management, roles and responsibilities, meetings, constitutions, conflicts of interest, asks some questions around policies and procedures, asks questions around risk management, questions around compliance, which is, checking that your license is being renewed appropriately, compliance issues around facilities, legislation and regulations, and some of the questions around, are you maintaining records around some of those things. Planning, are you looking at planning properly, and of course, staff and volunteers, retention and recruitment. So, for example, under committee management, some of the things will come out is to operate effectively, a board or committee should understand its roles and responsibilities, both as individuals and as a whole. When you're on a board, there is individual responsibilities you have, but there is also joint responsibilities as a board. Is your committee meeting regularly enough to perform its roles and responsibilities? You're often, and that's a question. There is no reason necessarily that you have to meet every month. Some stations might meet less often, maybe even more often, depending on situations. Are you operating under a regularly reviewed constitution that is up to date? We get stories in here all the time about, we haven't looked at our constitution in 10, 15 years. You should be looking at your constitution pretty much every year and making sure that it is up to date. Avoiding conflicts of interest, whether they're real or even just perceived ones, and ensuring that when decisions are being made, those issues are considered. So, Geordie, if we can go, or you've gone to the next slide, which is great. These are the sort of questions being asked about, and in this example at DYI FM, and these are the answers to their committee management question. So, for example, there's a couple of greens where things are good, and there's a few bad ones where, does your community radio station regularly review its constitution? We've said no in that example. The board management committee members understand their roles and responsibilities. We've disagreed to that. So there's quite a few reds in this and areas for improvement. So what eventually pops out after you've done this, as Geordie was explaining, is an action plan. And I think one of the really interesting things about this system is the report that pops out instantly at the end has a few action plans based on high priorities. So it's not going to say you have to improve everything all at once. What it's going to say is these are your areas of high priority, and Geordie showed you that little graph earlier that showed some areas were higher priority and some were lower. In this case, committee management is a high priority, and it's giving you some points to consider, some best practice, gives you an area on the action plan. It comes in a Word document where you can actually, as an organizer, as a community radio station, enter some details directly into it so you can actually use it as a planning tool at meetings. And then, of course, it provides some resources specifically for those particular issues, in this case around running of effective meetings, the role of board of management or committees, and the introduction to members, member roles for new members. So I think, again, what this is providing is a real tool for stations to use in assessing and then improving their governance. Over to you, Geordie.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. And I guess the other section that we start to look at then is culture and leadership. And this is one of my favourite sections to sort of go through and have a look at, because I think it's something that we don't always spend a lot of time on thinking about as a group at our stations. So in particular, culture and leadership It looks at the context of your community radio station, the character, its operating climate, its collective personality, and maybe just the way that you do things within stations. So starting to have a look at that, because we all know people get very stuck in their ways at radio stations. So it's a chance for you to sort of step back, have a little bit of a look at those things. And of course, the culture is shaped very much by the leaders of a community radio station. They're the ones setting those core values. They're setting the standards of what's acceptable and what's not. So it's reflected in the beliefs, the principles, any traditions, ingrained behaviours, and in particular communication practices within the station and your styles of operations. So culture and leadership, I guess, is something that we might not necessarily always look at very closely, and this gives us a chance to have a little bit of a think about it in some of the contexts. So in our example, there's a range of questions that they answered, and they divided up into two things. One was communication, so how we communicate within the station. The other one, the values, and what are the values seen as for the community radio station. DIY FM's going pretty okay on the values. I agreed with the statements that are in there. In particular, the community radio station positively manages behaviour and promotes the guiding principles of community radio. We said we were okay with that. But when it came to communication, there was a few things that we were a bit slack on. In particular, we never used a sort of targeted communication plan when promoting ourselves. Now, I'm not sure every community radio station does have a targeted communication plan. So that's an interesting one to kind of have a little bit of a think about and think about what you could do in that respect. But where do you start? So that's why the action plan comes in handy. Because it was identified as a high priority for DIY FM, it spat out this action plan for us. It includes some points to consider. It's asking me some questions about whether the station really understands who we're trying to talk to, and do we have a plan to contact members, potential members, supporters and listeners. It then highlights some best practice. So it talks about how effective marketing and communication can attract more members and of course be beneficial to the station in that way. But it also helps us understand what people want to know about if we've got that back and forth, and when and how they want to receive that information. So that's what a targeted communication plan would do for a station if we were doing that. It would be much more than just putting out our newsletter every week or every month, as many of us do. And then again, it refers to some resources. The CBAA resource library has a very handy communication strategy template in there. So you could just jump in and fill that in and see if it worked for your station. Of course, the implementation is the important bit. So making sure that that then you might go back a year later and do this health check again, and you might find that your communication plan is working perfectly, or it might need a little bit more work. Okay, John.
Thanks, Geordie, and thanks everyone for the lots of mission and vision statements that are being put up on in the chat box. That's great. And there's one question about from Peter about can you use it for can you use the health check for the local community centre? Happy for you to use it for any purpose, or anyone can use for any purpose they want, though just remembering it's been tailored for community radio stations, but can use it for other organisations if you so choose. So in terms of decision making, this is one of the other critical success factors, and decision making is really critical to a successful organisation. I think one of the keys to that is also using evidence wherever possible, and there's now lots of stations that are doing research of their members and research of their listeners, and there's other CBAA tools and resources that can help you with those sorts of things. But decision making is something that needs to be actually talked about. How are you going to make decisions? A lot of stations just work on voting, but do you have all the information you need to consider those questions in that process? So there's some again some questions around decision making. In this case, the ones we're showing you on the next slide are some questions around supporters and membership services. So are you Are you measuring how many supporters or members are rejoining this year? I often hear radio stations tell me after their radiothon to get more supporters signed up that they had about the same many as last year. But are they all new people? Are they different people? Often getting people to re-sign up is much easier than getting new people. So what is this, do you know how many people have rejoined and how many haven't, and how are you targeting them to sign up? And do you collect information around why they're joining and why they're not joining or subscribing? And again, around membership services, some questions. What's really important is it's really important that a community radio station records its membership information in a secure format. So there's some questions around some of those sorts of things. And again, the output is very similar. In these cases, they're medium priorities, so it's giving you slightly less information than the action plans on the previous slides, but it's giving you some tips and some hints and links through to the various resources. Over to you, Geordie.
Cool. I've just got a really loud siren going past at the moment. Thanks, John. Yeah, so it gives you that feedback and that best practice. And I guess that's kind of a bit of a summary of what it looks like. I do actually have it up on the screen here. So I've just punched I think, Danny, if you wouldn't mind sharing the link in the chat box again, that'd be great. People can pop in and have a look at it. Yeah, so it's up on the screen there for you, just to have a look at how it looks when you click into it. And I guess one of the things that CMTO is particularly interested in assisting with is if you were wanting to undertake this health check, the CMTO would be really happy to come along and facilitate a session with your board or with your management committee to actually go through the health check with you. So we already do training in fundraising and sponsorship, financial management, strategic planning, governance, and managing volunteers and compliance. So we can come and facilitate sessions where we go through the checklist, and then perhaps there's some tailoring of training we can do around things that might be highlighted during that checklist as well. So yeah, we'd really encourage you to get in touch with us about that at the moment if that's something you're interested in. But I'm sure there's probably opportunity also for boards are coming into new terms at the moment, so it's probably a really good opportunity to start your first meeting maybe by doing this in the new year, or if it's before the end of the year. What do you think, John?
I think that sounds like a fantastic idea. I had a couple of things sort of to add too. I said right at the beginning that doing it as a group is probably a really good way to do it. And the reason we say that is so you can actually discuss those questions. I know when we were testing it in here, we actually did some of that, and I think what was really good was to understand that not everyone agrees that you're doing something really well, and to use this as an opportunity to identify things that some board members might think are weaknesses and others might think aren't quite so weak, and discuss them. The other thing I wanted to add was when Geordie and I presented this at conference, there was one question about privacy and who would have access to these results. So what basically happens is when you fill that form out that Geordie showed you the first page of just before, when you fill out the health check and complete it, you will get emailed a report at the end, which we showed you quite a few pages of. That is for your information and your use. We are ensuring that organisations such as ACMA and others, the CBF, don't have access to this data, and that's because we really want you to honestly fill out this form and use it as your own internal tool. We will use aggregated data because it's, so we will be able to say there's, 300 stations have completed it, and a certain number of them are really good, but we won't be identifying any individual station in any of these processes. So we really encourage you to use it as a tool, as an internal tool to assess your own performance, I suppose, in this area. There was some, Geordie, before I hand back to you, and I think we all hand back to questions, I just wanted to, there was contact on that last slide, which was for Nadia at the CBAA office, or you can call Danny or Holly at the CBAA office too. They'll be able to help with any specific questions that you might have about the health check.
Great. I think you had a really good idea too, John, when we were doing it at conference, or maybe someone in the audience brought it up as well, is that one way that you could do it is to get individual board members and committee members to each have a go at it like on their own, and then come back together and see how well people did and how that matched up with what everyone else in the team was thinking. And that might be a kind of quick way to sort of gauge where everyone's at in the organisation on what their thinking is like, and then maybe do it again as a group. So I think we have some questions, Danny. We're ready to hand over to questions.
Excellent. There are indeed many, many questions. I think a lot of them, though, have been sorted out. I had David Meltzer. G'day, David. How you going? He hit me up for copies of the slides. I'm happy to provide those, but seeing as we're using the slides at the moment, I won't be able to do it till tomorrow. My email address is there. I'll flash it up again now so people can get in touch with it. And let me know. Oh, here's one for you, Geordie. Can the CMTO come to remote regions like Augusta, Western Australia?
We sure can. We can travel anywhere. How the process works, and I think that was Pip that was asking that, is that in the upcoming grant round, we will apply for funding to the CBF to travel to stations that would like training. So I'd encourage stations at this point, if this is something that you're interested in getting some CMTO training around governance, is the first step, and I'm just bringing up the CMTO website at the moment, is to fill in our CMTO training needs survey, letting us know that you want to do some governance training in the new year, and then we'll ensure that you get the one-page online application form so that your funding application goes in. And that means we can apply to the CBF for some funding so we can travel out to you and do some governance training with you. So please pop on to cmto.org.au and fill in that training needs survey. That would be really appreciated.
Thanks, Geordie. While you're talking about training, Peter Gourley had a question in regards to costs associated with training available from the CMTO.
Okay, so I think in terms of the health check, that's totally free. You can jump on and do that. There's no cost associated with that report coming back to you. With CMTO training, most of the training that we do is funded through the Community Broadcasting Foundation, so there is no cost to stations. It's completely subsidised, so it just means that you need to get into that, that training grant round. If for some reason you're unsuccessful or you miss the boat, we can actually quote for you to come out and do training, and it's pretty minimal prices for that. So if there's interest outside the sort of great grant funding rounds, just send me an email and let me know, and we could have a little bit of a chat about it. And we have done that in the past. Sometimes a board is meeting and they do want to have some governance training or a board induction, and it's a little bit out of the ordinary, and there is often professional development money within station budgets to do a bit of board training. So we can provide that at pretty low cost. So just get in touch.
Excellent. So obviously some queries there in regards to privacy of the results, so we have sort of discussed that they will be private. G-Man, g'day G-Man, how you going? He's noted that it'd be good to get approval from stations before information is shared, whether identified or not. I imagine that can be something that's taken into consideration. Any comments, either John or Geordie, on that one?
I'll just mention, G-Man, that no individual station data or a single station data will be made public in any way. It's just, what I'm saying is aggregated data. So we would say there would be 2,000 stations that completed this, and 90% of them are rated 20 something. You know, it's just large aggregated data. We may not even use that. There would be certainly no way any individual station would be identified in any of that process.
Excellent. And I should also note that sort of everyone who used the instant message box as a way of flashing up their station's vision or mission statement, thank you so much for doing that. It's great to sort of have that information there, see what stations are doing. We obviously sort of encourage transparency in regards to that, so we're hoping that that's the sort of information that people have got on their websites. Question from Nikki Page, who's at Radio Adelaide. I'm under the impression that there must be a few Radio Adelaide people there all logged in under Helen's account. G'day everyone, hope you're doing well. The station Radio Adelaide has finally developed a mechanism for membership based on the community of interest as defined by the licence. So this only includes people in the Adelaide metro area, despite the station having a wide listenership sort of on the traditional channels and also online. Do we know if this is an issue that's been addressed by other stations in their constitutions? So a bit of a curly governance one there. I'd suggest sort of that a station sort of being defined by a geographic community of interest and having that general community, your first priorities would be to the people there in that community. But I mean, obviously, if people who are outside of that geographic community are the ones who are enjoying that, then that's a great thing. But I think sort of those people in your geographic area would be your priority in regards to your community engagement and so on and so forth. Any thoughts, John or Geordie?
I think it's not a question I know an answer to right at this moment, but I'd certainly be something interested to have a little bit of a look into, I think.
Similarly, I'm interested in what a mechanism for membership sort of refers to. So that would be an interesting one to kind of look at a little bit further.
Yeah, any further information about that stuff, we'd love to hear about it, Radio Adelaide guys, and obviously feel free to email me whenever convenient. But that's great that you're sort of being proactive there in regards to that membership stuff, because anyone who's recently gone through the licence renewal thing will know that community engagement is one of those things that's really important there in regards to that. And obviously sort of a whole bunch of great stuff can trickle down from great community engagement there at the station. Just continuing to go through the questions and comments that are there, hoping that I haven't missed anything. If I'm going through all of this, Cynthia Keith has asked sort of about usage of the health check, sort of seeing as it's freely available, sort of issues that might possibly be there in regards to people who aren't on the board using the tool. I mean, openness and transparency is what we strive for in this sector, and the fact that people who might be outside of a board there and can check this out, I think would be a good thing. But obviously, as stated previously in regards to a different question, it is a tool that's been specifically built for boards. It's got applications for other things, but it's there for the boards of community stations. Now, checking out any other stuff here, there is some great, this has been one of the most busy instant message boxes that I've ever seen with everyone's mission.
I can hear you clicking away, just clicking and clicking.
There was some audio problems there with Can we get the slides? If you've missed anything, there will be a recording available. People, if I have missed anything, if you wouldn't mind writing it again, that would be absolutely fantastic, because I'd like to know. Commentary there.
A few people are weighing in on the Radio Adelaide membership issues. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and I'd like to know what people sort of think about that sort of thing. And obviously that is sort of something there to do with governance. But do people feel confident with how the community radio station health check is? And do you feel that it is something that you would like to take on there at your station? I know it's sort of, we've recently gone through AGM season, so there's the potential there that there might sort of be new boards at community stations, and we'd certainly encourage those new boards as part of the first movement to take on the community radio station health check, and just hoping that it's something there that is of use to community broadcasters. So yeah, anyway, anyone else got any other questions? Whack them on in there. Want to find out more about this? Hillary asks, would it have to do with license radius? I think they generally, and this is to further to the discussion as your community of interest being a general geographic community, I think they generally see that sort of the people that would live in your licence area plans would be the ones who would be in your general geographic audience. But that raises interesting questions there in regards to the fact that radio frequency waves aren't beholden to our definitions of where they should go, and they will more often than not go outside the boundaries imposed on us by our licence area plans, and sometimes there are some stations who have difficulty broadcasting to those places within their licence area plan. Jeff Cullen notes that he's completed the check earlier and looking forward to working through the report when received. Hopefully it has arrived. It's an automatic report that's generated. However, if you are experiencing any difficulty in accessing that report, please do let us know. What else we got there? Is anyone else seeing any questions that I might possibly have missed, in case you sort of thinking, gee, that Danny's clicking a lot and not getting anywhere? Irene from 4EB notes that they do regular checks on governance of their station, but love to have a template so that we're all uniform. Thank you very much. Hopefully it is something that you will take on and use. Obviously governance is sort of one of those major issues for the sector, and to have this tool available for community broadcasters is hopefully something that you'll perceive as valuable as we see it. Now, Geordie, I think I cut you off there.
No, it's all right. I was just reading Robert Vermas's comment about how they have formal meetings at monthly intervals, even though the Constitution says a 4-month maximum. He says, we minute every informal discussion and meet often to make decisions on technical and strategic reasons. So when we meet at a formal meeting, the minutes of the mini-meets are approved en bloc, with business arising in general business. It's so fast and gets a lot of business done with the relevant people. Even our local councillor is impressed that we do it because it's almost what they are leaning to. So I think that's really interesting. I think it's interesting to also find out about what works and what doesn't work for different stations, and sharing that information among stations. It would be great to have kind of a space where we can do that. Obviously, it's something that we can do at our CBAA conference every year, but yeah, maybe there's scope for us to have some kind of governance discussion group going on somewhere on Facebook page or something like that, like we have for the tech Q&A.
Excellent. I think that's a really fantastic idea, Geordie. Now, G-Man asks, how is the cultural component of this governance check handled? Now, I don't know if that's sort of something that requires sort of further clarification.
Look, I'd be happy to have a chat with G-Man to get a little bit more clarification of that question. But what I didn't mention earlier is in the development of this health check, we've based it on a health check that was developed by the sporting industry over the last few years. And that enabled us to use a really robustly tested and evidence-based system at, I suppose, a price that the CBAA and the community broadcasting sector could afford. I know in the development of that process there was a lot of consultation with groups of various different, of various different cultures, but also across various across diversity, or considering diversity. So I'd be happy, G-Man, to have a bit of a conversation offline about that and understand a little bit more about the question that you're asking.
And I'd be happy to have a conversation, G-Man, just because I love hanging out with you. Now, Jeff Cullen asks, perhaps an idea or another session bit I would be interested to know is how stations structure the boards or committees, i.e. by vote or appointed by a group, and how board nominating voting is conducted. Now, I'd suggest that would be information that is hopefully in your station's constitution. If your station constitution doesn't make that clear, the CBAA has a constitutional template available to members that you guys can take on, have a look at, see if it's suited to your needs or adapted to your purposes. But yeah, all of that, a lot of the questions that an individual might have about a community broadcasting station should be in the Constitution. If it's not there, it might be time to look at maybe updating the Constitution so it does reflect your specific needs. That's what I reckon.
Jeff,
I shouldn't be answering all
yeah,
the questions.
Jeff, I'll just add to Jeff's question by saying I think it's a really good question, and I think traditionally community radio stations have had majority of elected boards. I think there's very strong arguments for having a mix of, but a majority of elected with some appointed members. But that is an individual decision for a station and their community or their membership to make. But I do think there's some structural best practices that the CBAA will be considering and providing some education about in the future, and that may just be one of them.
Excellent. And Jeff clarifies that is indeed in their station's constitution, but he's interested in best practice and how other stations operate. I'd suggest, like, if you've got questions in regards to model rules and constitutions and whatnot, all of the various state bodies that look after that have templates available on their websites. So the constitutional template that the CBAA has put together for our members is one that we hope serves the needs of community broadcasters. But if you're looking to cast the net a little bit wider, I would check out what those state bodies who look after incorporated associations and whatnot look after. Now, Michael Jones asks, would CMTO facilitate to more than one station if they were willing? I guess it's sort of like a trading party happening there.
Mike, that's actually, a pretty good idea. If stations were willing in your area to get together and actually do the health check kind of across a couple of different stations and have some discussions around that and what's best practice in one station, what works well in one, doesn't work in another. That would be cool. I think we could do that. So just get in touch through that training needs survey. Let me know the other stations that might be interested. Because I do know that sometimes when, say, we're headed out to WA, it's worthwhile us getting a few different stations together to do a session at once. So yeah, definitely pop it in as something that you're interested in, and we'll figure it out.
Excellent. I'd go to a CMTO training party. It's just getting invited that I feel is the difficult part for me.
Yeah.
What else have we got there? Cynthia says, is the constitutional template similar to the model rules? It is, but it's sort of got extra little bits in there that we feel of ones that are specific to community broadcasters. Kate Larkham states that the 3BBB board would be keen to meet with other VIC stations for sure. I guess that's in regards to the training question, but I mean, meeting up is with your other community broadcasters is just a wonderful thing to do. We're happy to sort of receive any queries that you might have about facilitating that and us sharing contact information. I'd also suggest getting in touch with the CBAV, the Community Broadcasting Association of Victoria. Wonderful people representing wonderful organisations. I don't think I've missed anything here. Robert Vermeer says that station, Valley FM in Brisbane, are looking at consensus voting through the use of blue for cool or negative and orange for warm positive cards to make sure that every person gets their concerns addressed in decisions we make. That looks like could be a really good thing. And obviously, if the members of your station feel that's a great thing to do, then I would certainly give that thing a go. Carol says, giving the health check to board members for individual feedback sounds good. Is this easy enough to do? Now, I'd suggest that sort of the health check, the results that it prints are ones that look at the overall board and not individuals. But certainly, I mean, if there's sort of gaps there and it is the individual's responsibility, then that would be something that they would need to look at. Any thoughts on that one, John and Geordie?
No, I think it is really designed for an overall organisation's health check. But I think Geordie mentioned earlier, getting before a board meeting, get every board member to actually do it online themselves, and then comparing the results at the board meeting would be a really good thing to do. As one method of looking at collectively. The other one I mentioned was, sitting around in front of a computer at the board meeting and discussing each question and having a group decision on what the actual answer is the other way to to turn it into a collaborative process.
Excellent.
And it is easy to do because you just send people the link.
Yep.
That is, it's as easy as pie, this thing. Michael asks, are any board members at this session, and can committees of management join if not? I might need a bit of clarification on that one. Are you referring to CBAA board members, as in they're at this session, and can CO members join? If not, I'll just get you to type something in to clarify that. David Meltzer states it would be good to be able to get individual board members to take away and do themselves and then discuss. And we just dealt with that then, and he probably wrote that before you guys talked about it. Michael says, no, I mean station board members. I'm assuming that sort of the majority of people who've joined us here this evening would be representing the board of their station, but there'd obviously be people outside of that who are there. And now that you've clarified that, I'm going to have to go back to your individual question and look at that. Any board members at this session? And I'm not sure what you mean by that, but if you're asking sort of if this is in regards to accessibility of the health check, I'd have to say that it is easily available for everyone, and as stated, one of those things that's specifically built for community broadcasting station boards with applications outside of that.
Danny, can I just add, I mean, one thing we didn't mention is you can do it as many times as you like. Stations aren't limited to numbers of times, so you could do it, we'd be encouraging stations to do it on a fairly regular basis. Maybe you do it once a year, just as a check of where you're at, and as you fix priority items, then there'll be new priority items that will pop up as areas you can action. So be encouraging stations not to just look at it once and forget about it, but it's there for you at any time to use to do a check of how you're actually operating.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that. Eunice from 2SSR, which is here in the Sutherland Shire of Sydney. Hope you're doing well. It's probably hot as anything down there. At least you've got a beach close by. She states that they sort of haven't really done much review of their constitution over the years that the station has been operating, and it has been operating for 25 years. She feels that the check is brilliant and will be encouraging the management committee to actively participate. Thank you so much for that, Eunice, and thank you very much, Michael, for saying it's a brilliant tool, and I hope this is a view that is shared by all of our participants here this evening and anyone listening to the recording. It's an absolutely wonderful initiative, I feel, and good on the CBAA for doing it, and for the CMTO as well with their assistance.
And I don't think Eunice and to SSR are alone in that not making a lot of changes to the Constitution, and I kind of think that's probably not something people in their stations think about a lot and want to spend time on. But hopefully by going through and actually doing this health check, and as John mentioned, doing it every year, it will kind of activate that idea and the culture within your station that looking at the Constitution and reviewing the Constitution and also reviewing the way the board operates is really important. And will actually really kind of, I guess, improve the station practices, because you'll start to have a constitution that really reflects what the station is doing rather than just a sort of dead document that no one really understands or cares about.
That's right. And Irene has stated that all of our dancing partners, and I think she's referring to me there, so all of my dancing partners agree. Oh, Irene, it was a magical night at the 2017 CBAA
I got to dance with Irene twice. I got to dance with her at NEMBC as well.
So she's probably talking to you then. You're probably a really good dancer, Geordie, I'd suggest. Excellent. All right, then. Well, if there's no other questions, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for taking the time out to attend. As stated, this is the last webinar for 2017. And so as such, we're looking forward to planning our 2018 webinars. The webinars will return, just like James Bond. When you close on out of this session, there will be an evaluation there. We'd love you to fill that out as honestly and as comprehensively as possible. Thanks to everyone flashing up that they love the dancing and they love the party. You legends. And so, yeah, please fill that one out, because we'd love you to help shape the direction of future webinars and indeed the future of this wonderful community broadcasting sector. That's the one. Thanks so much to John and Geordie for taking the time out to look after this, and also for their excellent presentation that they gave on the very same topic at the 2017 conference. We hope you find the tool as wonderful as we find it. So thanks very much, John. Thanks very much, Geordie. On behalf of the CBAA, we wish you all the best for the festive season, and we hope to see you reinvigorated to keep this wonderful sector going in 2018. Any final words, John and Geordie?
No, just thanks very much, and it's been a real pleasure working with CBAA on this one.
Thank you, everyone, and I look forward to everyone completing their health check.
That's the one. All right, then, on behalf of the CBAA, have a great night, have a great holiday, get relaxed, be good, and we'll see you on the dance floor in 2018.